Two items that we were going to discuss today. One was the sewer and where all that stood, and another was to do with planning and comprehensive plan. The first item we will not discuss because of the lawsuit, so there will be no discussion on the sewer system. I was hoping we could update ourselves on it, but we can't do that, so there'll be no discussion on that. So we're going to discuss kind of planning on the island. Commissioner, the first thing I would like to do is get a definition from y'all of what overdevelopment is.
There's a question that, according to the Glenn County ordinance establishing the Island Planning Commission, our task is to develop a comprehensive plan for the future development of the unincorporated areas of Glenn County to protect established neighborhoods from incompatible commercial uses and inappropriate residential densities, to preserve significant historic structures and archaeological sites, to protect existing scenic or recreational values, to allocate planned area for commercial development and support services, to accommodate an amount and rate of development in appropriate locations consistent with the ability of Glenn County to provide necessary public facilities and services, to provide sites and opportunities for housing in order to maintain socio-economic diversity, to study and make recommendations as to future transportation needs in Glenn County, to maintain and protect environmental, scenic, regional values. I think that should be the task of this planning commission. That is set forth in the ordinance, and it's very clear, and that those are the issues we should be addressing.
It's clear depending on what your definition of those terms are. Well, we each have different definitions of those terms.
Well, then,
as
I understand it, prior planning commission spent a lot of time developing those terms, but they've never been adopted.
Well, we wrote that term. We did a comprehensive plan that does what that thing says.
Let's try to address these issues.
For example, let's go back to the overdevelopment. Is a road considered overdevelopment? Is it an F structure or a C structure?
There's nothing in here about overdevelopment. It's talking about that we should plan for.
So we have a plan. We have zoning in every place, so we're fine there. And I don't agree with that, but we have a plan. It's written. It states all those things you're talking about are stated in the plan. To have various kinds of residential areas, to have...
But it is ignored in planning and zoning decisions consistently.
I hear what you're saying. A lot of these properties that are beginning to be developed have been zoned for that for a good number of years. It didn't just happen.
But that's not necessarily so. For the last 2 years, I have been complaining about the frequent requests on a monthly basis to change the zoning from either.
Well, yeah, I'm not arguing with that part.
No, okay, let me finish my thought. To change the zoning requirements from, say, R6, R12 to PD. And if you do that, initially, it's going to increase the density automatically because it's throwing it wide open.
I would respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
Because every PD text has minimum lot sizes and has a density established for a number of units.
Okay. What's included in PD that you can't have in R6?
You could have variable lot sizes within the same development.
There you go. Restaurants.
Depends on how you write PD text. I mean, we have PD texts that are written purely residential. We have PD texts that are written purely commercial. Places like Frederica Township, that's part of the North End zoning case, that has a mixture of everything in it.
That's what I'm talking about. So are you saying that this is a favorable step to take whenever someone comes in requesting a change from R6? Or I made my comment primarily because last week, and I'm speaking generally, I went to the supermarket and an individual approached me. And it's a pending case that's going to be coming up, and said, we're going to request a change to PD, but we're going to decrease the density that we had originally planned. And my question is, even if they decrease the density, if that zoning change were to take place, it would be an increase in density. And that's, in accordance to what Desiree has said, I am concerned about things of this nature. We got 12,500 on this island now, another 6,000, 6,000 to 7,000 on Sea Island, And it took me 20 minutes to get up here from Benny's Red Barn to get up here today. And I think we've got to look at the total picture. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What are our goals? What are our objectives? This is why we're here now. And that's the concern that I am.
And what concerns me about PD text is that when, let's say, for example, you could have 100 units, and they say, oh, but we're only going to build 45. Okay, we say, okay, you're only going to build 45. At some point in time, that person, because of the change, is actually allowed to build that many units.
Yeah, and it's not PD text, it's any zoning.
Yeah,
So,
but you know, when they confine themselves, say, well, this is all we're going to do, well, that's fine. But once we make the zoning change, they really are allowed to do whatever it is.
Up to what the zoning change
Up to
says,
what the
but
zoning
if, when they
allows.
do a PD text, we can set the definition and they can only put 45
And
houses there.
how many PD texts have come back and said, but we're zoned for this, we could do this, won't you please change it to this? And I've never seen it repeated.
I've never seen one come through like that.
Wow.
I'd like to talk to Mr. Haney. May I, I don't want to interrupt that conversation.
That's fine.
Mr. Haney, that when I first came on the planning commission, you sent me and John Dow up to Savannah for a 2-day seminar on planning. And it was done by this Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And they presented an elaborate program that comprehensive plans are not set in stone per se, they need to be revised on a regular basis. But that the state had discontinued giving grants for doing that, and that they were concerned about people would not continue it, which we have not done. It has not been done since 2008, and I think that was probably the results of 2006. They stressed the planning to be done for a comprehensive plan had to start with public input about what the community wanted, traffic studies, water and sewer studies, and it needed to be done on some basis to where we're dealing with facts. It's not something you start at the end and try to work backwards on. Can you comment? I mean, you're an expert in planning and zoning.
That's the element that we're looking at. We are also in cooperation at the same time, I have a person assigned full-time going through from the top of the island to the bottom of the island, analyzing all these PD text and everything else and all the stuff that's down in the deep bowels of all the zoning cases that no one seems to know about because, you know, let's switch over staff and everything. And we're getting a comprehensive package together that will not only feed the land use analysis that I have a consultant done, RS&H, that's involved with it, but also the sewer and water consultant, APM, and we also have through the BATS committee a transportation study going to be done on the island, hopefully peak season and then during the season to analyze traffic on the island.
Well, don't we need the input of that before we can start doing much planning ourselves?
Well, that's where we're at. We're at the gathering point right now.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we should have a public forum in which we ask the public what their definition of rural development is.
Well, no problem. I would like to know, because if you take, for example, traffic seems to be probably the largest issue. And if you take what's already approved, for example, Frederica Township. You probably got 2,000 houses up that direction at least. You put 2,000 houses coming down to Frederica, and that's approved. Those are in place and they're going to happen. Now, I say it's a county and our responsibility to make sure that the systems will handle that, because that was all presented to us, presented to the county and approved. And I go with you on a planning. We should plan on how we're going to handle that. That's nothing that's going to happen tomorrow. But as they sell those lots and people develop, Butler's Point, Hampton Point, Plantation, and all those houses up that direction, we got a big break because Cannons Point's not going to be developed.
We're going to get some that are not R6 or R12. We're going to be getting some requests coming in that's going to be requesting changing that zoning to PD, and that's what I keep
Well,
bringing up.
then that's our responsibility not to let that happen. We don't have to approve PD if it increases density.
And that's what I'm saying, and it's definitely going to be an increase in density.
That's fine. I don't think we have increased that, but we'll see if they come.
Well, the other thing too, that's even more problematic is yes, we got all this stuff on the north end, but on the south end, you've got a lot of parcels that are heirs property. In other words, they are in R6 districts and they're an acre plus that could be subdivided, and the right of use is there. In other words, they can be subdivided if someone ever purchases those or if they're ever sold. The other thing that happens is there's an awful lot of homes that are built on double and triple lots on the south end. And more so now that I've started really looking hard and looking at the tax map versus what's built, there's a lot more of that than you realize.
Help me, because I don't know that it's already zoned, but that, you know, looking at it, that you know you're going to create terrific hazard with traffic and with water and sewer, and what is our obligation when we have something that you know, does not make sense from a public interest point of view?
What's best we look at is we try to mitigate that through the planning process that we have available at that time. And when you get past the zoning, it goes my pyramid that we're trying to solve is far easier to solve problems at the time you're dealing with the zoning case, because that's a legislative act that gives you more flexibility about imposing things. When you get down to site plans and subdivisions, those are more or less ministerial acts where you are essentially checking the box, and if they meet the requirements, you're kind of bound to approve.
Right, but more to Stan's point is that there's an obligation. Once the county has accepted the zoning, there's an obligation, I think, that the county has taken on. I mean, and they have to realize that,
yes,
to provide the infrastructure, the roads, water, and sewer. Now, in some cases where you had a parcel that was zoned 40 years ago, the infrastructure at that time was probably adequate. Of course, now the island's grown up, but the zoning's still there. We can't take that away from them, as Dave said. That's a taking.
Yes, you can. Sure.
You can't take it away from them.
Sure you can.
Well, all right, there's two groups that can zone. One is the property owner. The other is the Board of Commissioners. If the Board of Commissioners is going to zone, they get into the taking issue the same as anyone else does. So that's one of the things we would have to look at is what is the legal implication of the board doing preemptive zoning, essentially to down zone pieces of property and take value away.
Well,
So at one time, we had a county commissioner who wanted to say on the island that there would be no rezonings less than 12,000 square feet. That didn't get adopted. Is that not something?
That's something. That's one
something
of the
we can
possibilities.
do?
Yes.
But by and large, we have.
No. It's
It's
just
still
we have
six.
it prohibited on our R6 zoning.
No more R6s.
Yeah, but by and large,
That means
though,
9.
Yes.
we haven't, and I notice it's Preston's been here because it's been Preston's issue, is we haven't had very many, if any, issues that have come back to us with increased density. Or
Let me get back to the original point of this meeting, which is planning, I think. I'm certainly not enough knowledgeable and experience, maybe Robert, maybe Preston, but Mr. Henning, what is it we should be doing to fulfill our mandate according to the county ordinance?
Well, you are reviewing the plans and everything as submitted. You will be involved right now in a great deal of zoning reviews and map revisions if I see what's comes through as part of the moratorium issue.
So what should we be doing now?
Right now, you just have to sit and wait till we formulate the plan, because we throw things at the wall right now and try to figure out, will it work or what are the implications,
Will
because.
this body and the public be
Yes, sir.
part of formulating those?
Yes, sir.
I mean, it won't be fait accompli when we get a look at it.
We will present you ordinance amendments. because I have to formulate and proof out an ordinance amendment. There is going to be, and I'm not, there's going to be public meetings before it gets out, but the Board of Commissioners is going to vet what comes out from all of our issues.
Are they gonna vet it through the islands and mainland planning commissions, or?
Well, right now, they're vetting it with them, and I will say, anything that has to come out through, as far as ordinance amendment or map amendments, because the future land use map was adopted by both parties, any changes there would have to come out through both committees, and then to the Board of Commissioners.
What about the tree canopy, the landscape, the
Yes,
architect?
those will all be ordinance amendments.
And so the vetting would be through?
Yes.
So there'll be public meetings to discuss those issues and chances to change.
Yeah, if you recommend changes to them, yes.
But, yeah, we can just recommend to change it. Board of Commissioners will decide what they're gonna do with the change.
And what would be the timing of that?
I'm still working on that.
Has to be within 90 days, right?
No, I don't think, no, I don't know that I'm gonna make it 90 days. I'm desperately trying, you know, and we have a schedule to do that, but.
We'll say can, but it's.
We won't make adoption in 90 days. I don't see that, so.
But we do have a role in that process.
Yes, sir.
And there's not a lot that we can do now
No.
to implement or to contribute or to be part of that
No,
process.
because I don't have anything drafted to show you to take to public hearing yet. To where you can say, okay, here's what we're proposing and here's the reason why we're proposing it.
Mr. Kirk, and I'd like to know, is Mr. Hanley satisfied, you know, if we're going to have a role to play in reviewing and approving this, then, you know, that satisfies me a great deal, because I was concerned that we would not. Because, you know, so far it's been.
Yeah, I didn't know if we would or wouldn't, because that's
Well,
what
you
the
know,
county commission desires, but.
But it disturbs me that the 90-day moratorium and the work plan was developed without any public input or any input from this planning commission. And a consultant was hired without any input from the planning commission. I was concerned we were going to be bypassed, and it was going to be done behind closed doors.
Now, and I'll tell you why you were bypassed on that, because if I would have gone out through normal protocol and procurement procedures, I would, on the 90 days, I would have burned 11 weeks out of the 12 weeks on the moratorium to hire a consultant.
It would take longer than that.
Yeah.
Max.
So that's why
Maybe it was a mistake to shorten the moratorium.
I originally asked for 180 days. I got 90. But this firm had already been working down here. They're doing our long-range transportation planning, so they have familiarity with some of the transportation issues already. So
I share Desiree's concern. I looked pretty thoroughly at their website, and I saw nothing as far as you know, planning or land use type things. It was all engineering, airports, bridges. It was a construction engineering firm, maybe traffic, but that it had nothing to do with what you would normally think of, say, a planning outfit.
I'm dealing with two planners. So.
Could we maybe get some other qualifications or experience?
Yeah, yes. There's very little FA zoning, which was the holding pattern for zoning.
Forest agriculture.
Forest agriculture left on the island. Most of it has been zoned and everything. Now that goes back to, remember what I said, I have a full-time person in right now doing every parcel. So she's going through and looking at all those parcels and identifying what, I'll get back to my guys as a developer, is entitled on there based upon the current zoning about what you can legally do as far as density on that piece of property.
Tony, it might be very naive, I don't know. But in Europe, they don't ever widen roads. They don't ever take down trees. They don't ever take down buildings because they recognize how important they are. They simply have cops that direct traffic. Is that not possible on this island?
Yeah, well, down in Florida, we have a highway program and a classification called a constricted arterial, where we will define a road, and it's very similar to up here on Frederica, where we were going through an old fishing village area, and we determined that we wanted to keep the character of the old road versus widen it with, which is truly what it needed to be, was a 4-lane road. And we just declared it and said, we're just going to live with it as that constrict arterial, and everyone's going to have to live with the service level that it generates. So yeah, that is a possibility, and that may, when it comes out on the study on the transportation part, it may be that we recommend just doing this, and everyone's just going to have to live with this level of service that we're going to provide.
I mean, it just seems like an easy way to solve the traffic problem. Nobody would have to stop for more than a minute or two if everybody had little walkie-talkies or something.
Well, we can do a lot of that with technology now by integrating traffic control signals. So.
Well, why even put in more traffic signals? Why don't you just have a person? Wouldn't that be cheaper?
Job creation.
No.
That'd be cheaper to
And if you don't want to hire more cops, then get volunteers to do it.
That's Matt. That's Matt's issue.
I'll stand out there and tell them to stop. I mean, you know,
Yes, sir.
I gotta go, thanks.
If we define overdevelopment, and I think most people would agree, overdevelopment, as Desiree suggested, is when your infrastructure is overburdened. You guys all seem to be assuming that when your infrastructure is overburdened, you have a legal obligation to build more sewers or widen the roads. And my question is, are you sure that's the law? I don't think it is.
I'm not sure. My impression from people was that's the law, but I don't know that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to make a related point. I don't know if you know CARE, but for years I worked for the Regional Development Center in planning, so I'm quite familiar with the profession and the legal aspects and constraints of planning. But Dave can comment. The attorney could elaborate further. Maybe it was a specialist attorney you'd want to hear from around the state that could summarize. The fact is, downzoning does occur and it is legally upheld in court, depending upon the circumstances. So don't act as if you have to honor every subdivision ever given, because that's just plain not true. If there's a public interest in reducing the density or keeping density where it is, rather than submitting to those previously platted lots, there is a defensible way around that. I think you're kidding yourselves if you think you just have to cave in on this old zoning. But the other thing is I gave each of you, or I left a number of copies up there, I'm not sure if it got one, publication by the Department of Community Affairs about defining and planning for, and I might say protecting, community character. I think that's at the heart of the density issue and the overbuilding issue. If you continue to, as this gentleman was saying, if you continue to expand infrastructure to accommodate development, that's a never-ending game, which is going to inevitably lead to a violation of your sense of community character and ruin the qualities of this island that we cherish the most. So that's a no-win strategy. You have to define limits, honor those limits, and defend them like hell in court. That's my opinion.
Amen.
I agree with Rawson and Dave. I think years ago when I was in law school, we had a professor that was an expert really in municipal corporations, zonings, and I think we can find, I mean, there's a lot of confusion. First of all, I want to thank you all for serving on the board, but I think we could find a professor at Emory in Georgia, or Georgia State, who's immersed himself or herself in this topic that could discuss. I mean, there's so much confusion about what we can do and what we can't do. You know, we have a great county attorney, I know him very well, but you know, we're not all experts in every area. I think we need to bring in an expert, a real expert in Georgia law, these issues, and can maybe have a public forum so people, like most of us who don't understand what the law is, aren't as confused and are more tolerant about what you have to do. I think, you know, the infrastructure, the things that Rawson mentioned about the impacts on roads and sewer and water and police and fire, all of those things have an effect when our density continues to increase. If you go to Florida, I mean, I looked at properties, Rawson's very familiar with them, where the impact fees on a 30-acre parcel was $1 million. Not because the impact wasn't just in front of that particular piece of property, it could have been 1 or 2 or 3 miles down the road. And the purpose of the impact fees is to alleviate that, and it may not be just at your particular location. I mean, there's so many things that can be done to address these issues, And I think the problem is, we don't have the basis to make some of those decisions. And I think if we're going to deal with, and I know Georgia's a very strong property state, property rights state, but I do think, as Dave and Rawson mentioned, it's not practical to think that somebody out in western part of Glenn County wants to develop a project that we ought to change and run sewer lines everywhere everybody wants to develop. I mean, it just doesn't work. There is a timetable. The county has a plan as to the extension of infrastructure, and I don't think it's realistic to think that we have to accelerate that plan to accommodate a particular development until, if it does meet the county's schedule, then that's fine, then it'll be out there in the appropriate time. But I think there's so many issues here that we don't know anything about.
Question in terms of how do you begin to evaluate when you're looking at new projects and residential projects, for example, Mariners Way, and how do you evaluate into the context of that neighborhood and the function of what goes on up Hamilton Road? And you have Gascon Bluff and Epworth, and we only have 12 units of condos at the moment, soon to have 179 more. But was there ever a consideration about the path it takes to analyze the number of boating vehicles that come through there, the number of medical facility patients that run through there, the number of events there are, Gascon Bluff, American Legion, Casino Garden? Somehow we get lost, and I'm new to this game, so I apologize for being a little naive, but it looks as though those things are never considered. You consider only the request for 125 new patio homes, and the developer has the right to put them in there because of the historical zoning. But when do you take a look at the function of a geographic area? That geographic area has one street going into it. And that same street is the only street getting out of there. So we don't begin to look at those kinds of things 2 years from now when all those places are built. We're going to look back and say, why didn't we do something?
Yeah, I guess that two things to me. One is, why does the people that built the first ones have a right to build, and the guy that owns the stuff in front of him doesn't have a right to build? I have a real problem with that street. Just a minute. That street was there, and so this guy that built first gets a choice, and the guy that owns the property in front of him doesn't have a choice. I have a real problem with that. That's me. Why did that person have a right to build? Why do you have a right to live there and come out, and the next person in front of you doesn't? I have a problem with that. We have to solve that through the infrastructure, in my opinion. Not by saying nobody can build there anymore. Here's this structure, nobody can build there. We have to solve that infrastructure problem, in my opinion, or we should sell those 12 back there. Let's shut this down and tear it down and nobody be back there. That's the other option, in my opinion. That's me. We're not talking legal, we're talking my opinion. So when I look at those things, that's the way I had to look at that myself. Now, we have to, other people look at it differently, but why do I have a right to live up where I live, and I'm not going to let anybody else build at Frederica Township because the road's going to be full of cars?
Seems to me short-sighted thinking.
Well, it may be. I think you have to go expand the road, because why did I have a right to build, and you that moved here 3 years ago don't have a right to move here and build? Why do I have that right? Because I came here 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Why do I have a right, yet you that came across the bridge yesterday doesn't have a right to have a house here?
Answering my question.
Because there's no room.
So anyway, I'll let Robert answer. That's just my opinion. Robert's going to give you yours. And we're not going to argue about it. That's my opinion.
The way I see that is the time that takes place. When you assess the neighborhood and you decide whether or not something is appropriate, is at the time it's zoned. And in that particular case, that whole area there, that entire area, to include the parcel that you are currently living in and everything around it, was zoned, already zoned. It was zoned RR, resort residential. That was zoned at a time, I think, almost 40 years ago. And at the time, there was a big plan, a big master plan for several phases of condominiums. In fact, the parcel that you're living in now was one phase of, I think, 2 or 3 phases. Right. And so there are additional phases to be built, but that all took place, all the assessment of whether or not it's proper took place at the time it was zoned. A lot of the zoning we see on St. Simons currently did take place one time in 1964. That was when our zoning ordinance came in effect.
64, 66, yes.
66, okay, it was 64, 66, somewhere in there. A lot of the basic zones that we have now on the island have not changed.
All helped us.
So then what we really need to be looking at, if the zoning was set 40 years ago on this island, for the most part, then what we really need to look at, so what's suggested is how do we do down zoning?
Right.
That's what we really need to look at. If the zoning is set and we have to do what the zoning says, then we need to look at that. If that's the base.
The issues and all of that, but it is a consideration with long-term planning. I mean, how do you accommodate those people? Right now, everybody I know well, in grocery stores and drugstores and
Landscapers.
Well, you see it in the morning, coming on, everybody lives on St. Simons, works in Brunswick, everybody works on.
Right, and so in the morning you get this huge influx, and in the afternoon they all go home. And we're discouraging them from living here.
Well, we could have transit,
Well, that's
which is more efficient, handles more people with fewer vehicles.
true.
And the county commission has been reluctant to accept the money from Washington in order to even start a system. I don't know why we don't encourage Cap Fendick to put on more trolleys and have those trolleys run around the island and stop in places where they pick up people instead of just showing them the sights. We've got a transit system. Sea Island has a transit system. Sea Island transports people back and forth all the time. The medical people have a transit system. We've got probably 5 transit systems on the island, but they're not coordinated, and not everybody can access them. So that's a matter of organization. That's not a matter of having more roadways.
Another question, I think, to your question about everybody having equal rights to access sewer and water, and I think that's probably true, except in our business, and I'm sure Rawson can confirm it, we oftentimes reserve our rights in the, we get in the queue for sewer and water. There are properties that have been, that have been zoned commercial in other areas that I've worked where you've got to get in the queue. I mean, you're not automatically entitled to it. You've got to reserve those rights, and they have limitations and time frames on them. If you don't use it by a certain time frame, it expires. And I think we're in that situation. Everybody's suing the county, but the first thing we do is check if there's water availability, sewer availability, water pressure, all the things we have to operate our business. And if we don't have it, I mean, we can sit on it until we get it. But that's all we can do. I mean, I don't know how much the county can do. They'd be scattered all over the county trying to provide infrastructure all over the place instead of sticking with a plan, as I mentioned earlier. But I think there are ways to address those, and that is to have some kind of queue. You know when you're going to be able to build. You're not going to borrow the money till you get ready. You know you're going to have your facilities and stormwater and other facilities available so that you can develop your property. It's not preventing people from developing property, but we all can't do it at the same time. It just doesn't work that way.
Even here, we're saying we got to do it, and they're saying we don't have to do it. And obviously, I don't think Aaron has that time or capability, but that.
Remember, I alluded to the fact that Aaron's going to have to hire a consulting attorney that deals specifically with that type of category. I will raise the issue with him again and see if we can get it done.
I've got some suggestions when we get to that.